Welcome to the presentation from AURIN. My apologies for our technical issues earlier. I hope this video will be useful for you to look at the data that's available through AURIN to help enhance your hack. We'll dive right in. So we're the Australian Urban Research Infrastructure Network, and we are the single largest national resource for accessing and interrogating thousands of data sets spanning the physical, social, economic, and ecological aspects of Australia's cities, towns, and communities. We're funded by the federal government, NCRIS, the National Research Infrastructure for Australia. And they fund large pieces of infrastructure that are shared by Australian researchers. For example, there's a synchrotron that's based in Melbourne, that's a very big piece of expensive infrastructure that researchers can use, scientists can use to look inside atoms, however that works. And they book time on the synchrotron to be able to conduct their experiments and get the results they need without having to invest the millions of dollars in building that type of infrastructure. NCRIS funds that type of infrastructure for researchers to share. And we're one of those. We're an e-infrastructure in that we are 100% online, and we provide our infrastructure that can be shared across all Australian researchers. Through building this infrastructure, we created a data catalogue of data, and we also developed a vast network of leading researchers and data providers across academic, government, and private sectors. Research organisations such as FIDO, the Public Health Development Information Unit, private entities such as Australian Property Monitors. They're owned by Fairfax Media, and they provide us with a lot of housing data. And then there's federal, state, and local government departments, all providing data that they have on their jurisdictions through AURIN to all researchers to be able to interrogate and access in one location. We also have some data from a lot of non-profit organisations. For example, the Bicycle Network, they gather a lot of data on cycling and bicycle use across Australia, and we help them capture that data and make it available to researchers. We've provided a one-stop online workbench with access to these thousands of data sets across different disciplines, and it's completely free of charge. So we've created the workbench. It's a powerful online and secure environment that allows these researchers across government, academia to access, analyse and visualise this quality data, and then they're able to generate meaningful knowledge through their research. We call it urban intelligence, and this is the evidence base that they need for informed decisions around smart growth and stable development of Australia. You can see here there's 5 main components of the workbench. We have our online portal, which is an online GIS system. We have our APIs, which we'll be looking at today, and that's programmatic access to the data. We have our AURIN map, which is an online data viewer. You're welcome to view data on there. It's an open website. And we have our data search. This is our catalogue of all the data that's available through AURIN. And we also have a robust help desk that's available for tutorials and user guides on how to use data and the tools that we make available. And also we have an AURIN help desk where you can email and get help with the research and the data that you're trying to use, troubleshooting. So this is the AURIN API, or this is a picture of what you can produce with the AURIN API. Here I've used QGIS, an online open source GIS system, and I've connected it to our API to have programmatic access to the data. And you're able to do this on your desktop GIS if you use ArcGIS, or any other web application that you might have. You can connect to the data through the API. You can connect it to web and mobile apps that you might be producing, or into statistical analysis tools like R. So you can access the data, run your analysis using whatever tools it is that you are used to using, and be able to get quick, really good results quickly. And I'll provide a link to the API in the notes as well that come with this video. And here's where you access the API with that link. It's a very quick process. You just click the button, provide some information, your email and name, etc. And then we email you the user ID and your key to access the API. And then you'll be able to retrieve data quite simply through our WFS call, or you can run some more complex code in order to connect the data through to your application. But what data would you use, right? How do you know what data you need and what data will be relevant for your particular application? Well, I suggest you start with our data search. And you can find that on our website. I'll also provide a link straight to this page. And let me just bring it up here. Can you see that? So this is our data catalog, data.aurin. Oh, that's straight back to the website. Hold on, let it load. Apologies for my internet connection. Here we are at the main page of AURIN, and up here you can see there's a data search button. We click that, and you can see there's 5,500 data available through AURIN. So that's a lot of data to search through. We've broken it down by organization. So if you wanted to cut straight to a particular organization's data, you could click that and go straight to the organization and see all the data that's available from them through the AURIN API. We've also organized it into groups. This is where you want to be, because we can narrow it down to the data that's available just through the API. So licensing permits certain use of data or certain accessibility of data. And not all of the data sets that we make available through AURIN can be made available through an API purely for licensing reasons. And that's up to the data custodians to say what their license is. So we've taken all the CC BY, that's Creative Commons by attribution data, non-commercial use, and we've made it available through the API. And here you can see there's 4,800. So it's a fair portion of our data is available through the API. There's just some additional other data that we can't unfortunately make available. But that's okay, there's plenty here to work with. And this is data across population, health, economic, socioeconomic, and built infrastructure data as well. You can do a simple keyword search in the keyword box there, and it will bring up all the data that has those keywords in the metadata. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So here, if we were to search, say, health, it's going to call back 1,200 data sets with the word health in the metadata. And by that I mean, if you look into one of these larger data sets and scroll down, you can see the aggregation level that it's at, the geography level of the data, and the attribution list. So you can see within this data set, we have attributes on fair or poor self-assessed health count. And then we have the rate per 100 and the statistical level 2 code. So that's the geography at which the data is set. You can also see how the data can be attributed when you're gathering your reports on your app, or however you're applying this data. You can attribute it with the information that's given in that metadata table. And also for the API, you can see there is the Open API ID here. This is the code here that corresponds to this data set. And this is the information that you can put into a WFS call if you're wanting to just pull that individual data set from the API. So let's have a deeper look at the data. I've split it up into themes that I think might be helpful for you. First of all, we have a lot of social data. And this is important to know more information about the audience that you're targeting. And this idea of user-centered design, the population that you're serving, are you serving that correct population? It was touched on, user-centered design stuff was touched on by the IBM workshop at the weekend. I really encourage you, if you haven't seen it, to look back at the recordings. The links are in the Slack, because that was a really excellent workshop to look at user-centered design. because we find that it's great having really fancy technical solutions, but at the end of the day, are they serving well from the user perspective? So who lives where, and what's more information about them? Well, through AURIN, we have accessed data from large organizations such as the ABS, and they have great data. There's obviously all the census data available in there, but they've created these other data sets such as the data by regions data sets. And that's information on education and employment, land and environment, health and disability, economy and industry, which would be really helpful right now in COVID days, population and people, income, and the number of people born overseas as well. The ABS also creates some really great indexes. For example, we have the CEFA index, that's the socioeconomic indexes per area. And that looks at the relative socioeconomic advantage and disadvantages of areas. So you can really get a rich idea of who the people are and how their life is as they're experiencing it on the ground. Other organizations that also provide indicator or index data in this social realm would be FIDO is a good organization, a great organization. They're the Public Health Information Development Unit. And there'll be a test on this at the end of the video. So FIDO, they have great data on housing and transport. They also have measures of disadvantage that they've created as well. And their data is using public health areas. So they've split up Australia into geographic areas that are pertinent to public health or good measures of public health. Another organisation to make note of would be NatCen. They're based at the University of Canberra, and they're the National Centre for Social and Economic Modelling. They've developed indexes from ABS data and some other data as well, some other surveys, housing expenditure surveys, the HILDA data, to name a few. There we go. And they're all available through this, the API as well. We have some large national indexes as well. For example, Vampire, vulnerability indices for mortgage, petroleum and inflation risk and expenditure. That's a mouthful. I think they created the name to fit the acronym. And they look at areas of vulnerability, especially in the outer areas of cities where people have moved for cheaper living expenses, so cheaper rent or cheaper mortgages, but they're at risk if there's a shock to oils because they might be car dependent on traveling into the city for work. And those outer areas tend to not be as well serviced by public transport, etc. So we create a very vulnerable population in terms of their ability to conduct their lives when they are not serviced properly out in those outer areas. So Vampire Index is a really interesting data set. I really encourage you to look at that and have a dig through the attributes that are involved in there. And these can all be found through that data catalogue. So for example, I would just search Vampire in the catalogue and it will bring up those data sets that are available of that index. Then there's state data as well. So all different state government organisations will gather their own data sets too. Like for example, in Victoria, we have DELP, the Environment, Land, Water organisation. And they have a lot of data about number of households and household type and Victoria in the future, population estimates, etc., which I think would be quite handy for your COVID applications. Future populations are important. And they have, household dwelling data as well. So that's handy to have. Although if you're looking at a national solution for your in your mapping or in your application, just be aware that the different states offering different data, sometimes it doesn't mesh well across the whole nation. So you have to be careful about where the data is coming from, the organisation that's collecting it, and the geographic extent of that data. So we'd have that data for Victoria. The equivalent data in Queensland might not be available, but you might have something that's similar. So that's an important point to consider when you're searching the data and using it in your solutions. And next we have health data. So there's a lot of data out there on COVID in terms of like infection rates, locations, etc. And we're working with those organisations who are curating and collecting that data, and we hope to make it available through AURIN soon. But for the purposes of this hack, I encourage you to look at those organisations and bring that data in to work with the AURIN data too. So with health, we've got national data sets. Would be a good one is the Department of Health published the national toilet map. So they have the point location of every toilet in Australia, which is really important in terms of providing facilities for public use. And during these COVID days, we're out in the parks a lot more and probably using this infrastructure more. And it's also, you know, a pain point in terms of infection being spread as well. So be interesting to know what the council's plans are and the information that local councils are using in order to keep facilities open under the guise of, you know, of the COVID era. Be interesting. There's also a national organisation called, or a government group called the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. They have incredible amounts of data on health, and we've ingested a lot of it, a lot. So they have information on mental health admissions, the number of hospital beds, emergency presentations by demographic. So yeah, health risk factors by age group. And as I said, it's a national data set, so you'll have consistent data across all of the states and territories. Back to FIDO, who I mentioned earlier, the Public Health Information Development Unit. They've produced some data sets around private health insurance and hospital cover and income support recipients. They have really dense data that's available at the national level. And again, this is where in the data catalogue you can search the attributes to check if the data is relevant for your application. And this map here I've just put up as an example. That's the AURIN map. So it's the free web browser-based map visualization tool. And we preloaded those data sets so you can get a quick visualization of what that data looks like. This is looking at health risk factors. And that's obesity and LGA level. So you can see it's Brisbane, and you can see those lighter areas around the Brisbane centre are a low level of obesity, but once you get out into the regional areas, obesity increases. So it's important to see those regional differences, especially in Australia. And again, state data sets are available through health. For example, the Queensland Department of Health, they have great mental health activity and data collection and service information. So I encourage you to search not only the national level, but at those individual state levels as well, where they're able to dig a bit deeper. Okay, then built infrastructure. So this is data that we have around the physical buildings and the infrastructure that make up the fabric of our cities and towns. Different states, again, have different data that's available. For example, in Victoria, we have building footprints of every building in Melbourne CBD. It's a really big data set, kindly made available from the state of Victoria. And DWELP, also the Department of Environment, Land, Water, Resources, they have VicMap. And a lot of the data from VicMap is around features of interest, locations of police stations, emergency facilities, sporting facilities, etc. And again, that's for Victoria, so have a look to see what is available in other states if that's an avenue that you're pursuing. Yeah, that's great data to have available. On the national side, we have all of the OSM street network data. That's a very large data set as well. It's really intricate and very, very useful. And other organisations like the Australian Bureau of Statistics has data on types of dwelling and with attributes such as number of solar panels on the roof. So once you dig into the data sets, you can actually see that there's a lot of other information that the name of the data set might not actually reveal. So type of dwelling, you'd say apartment, freestanding house, etc. But number of solar panels, that's a surprise that information is in there. So within the data catalog, if you search solar panels, it would bring up ABS types of dwelling as a data set that has that information in it. Another data set that I wanted to bring your attention to is the Australian City Farms and Community Gardens Network Directory. That's a point location of city farms and community gardens across the country. And it is curated by a non-profit organisation. The farms and the community gardens submit their location and information about their properties to the organisation, and then we ingest the data from there. So I thought that would be helpful in terms of like this idea of third place, where we need a third place to go to. We have our work, we have our home, and then we have our community connection through a third place. And we find that often community gardening comes up as that. And in this new COVID era, this might be problematic in terms of how they continue to operate under the different restrictions that we live under now. And also moving forward, we found that there's been a lot in the press about open space and crowded parks, and we needing to look at investing in that kind of infrastructure to make our the livability of our cities better. And so that's a really cool data set. Then there's also like transport infrastructure. So I think here are going to have that pretty well covered, but I just wanted to draw your attention to, we've connected to Geoscience Australia, and they provide locations of like major ports or aviation, air traffic control centres, and that kind of larger infrastructure information. That might be useful for whatever application you're putting together for the challenge. Then mobility. Again, I think here we're going to have this very well covered. I'm not even going to pretend that we have anything better than what here will be providing for you. But there is a few data sets that I'd just like to highlight for you. For example, within the ABS census data, they have lots of information about method of travel to work. And that's by sex, by occupation, and it's available at different geographic levels. So you can narrow down to a very small suburb, or you can look at it from a state and a national perspective as well. So that's really cool. We also have connected to the picture that you see there is SNANETS, which is a really cool acronym as well. We've got vampire, we've got SNANETS. So that stands for the Spatial Network Analysis for Multimodal Urban Transport Systems. And here, that's Brisbane, the Brown map, and it's broken up by route segments, and there's activity nodes that you can see are point locations there, and it's some really good data there on transport systems. So I'd advise you to check that out. They're also available on the AURIN map if you just want a quick visualization of what it looks like. Bring it up on the AURIN map, and that's a screenshot from that map. There are a few other data sets within this realm that I think might be helpful. So in South Australia, an organisation called Location SA that we partner with, they have really great data on point locations such as GPs and hospitals and school crossings and that kind of infrastructure as well. So that might be worth looking at. And there's a lot of good crash statistics from the Tasmanian government. And of course, I mentioned the bicycle network data from the Victorian government as well. So when you are searching through this data and trying to ascertain if it's useful for your application or not, you can look through that attribute list and see if it's relevant. But keep in mind the level of geography that you're working at. So I've mentioned that data sets are collected at different geographic levels or different geographic boundaries. So by that I mean in the data table, it's information about a location. So it could be an ID of a location, it could be a shop name or a street name. as an indication of what the spatial quality of that row would be, of that attribute would be. Whereas geometry, that defines the spatial location or extent. So the geometry that we have will be in the attribute table, that could be like a lat long that will show a point location of something, or it could also be a geographic boundary about that defines a spatial extent, such as suburb or LGA, local government authority, or one of the ABS statistical boundaries. So the ABS have developed these statistical boundaries that are more statistically relevant than our regular political boundaries that we already have. Like a political boundary would be a local government area. That's the jurisdiction of that local government. Whereas the ABS has split it up into what we call SA1, SA2, SA3. And SA1 is just a little bit bigger than a couple of blocks, or maybe almost the size of a suburb. SA2 would be about a suburb. SA3, a collection of suburbs. SA4, a state would, have a handful of SA4s, and these nest really nicely in together, so the data can be interrogated across those spatial extents. But when you're gathering the data, using the data, bear in mind, if it says SA1 or SA2, that's an ABS statistical geography. If it says PHA, it's a public health area, and that those boundaries have been defined that work best for health outcomes and health research. So the geography extent is always stated in the attribute table, so just pay attention to what that geographic extent is and what the boundary is, to make sure that you're interrogating across your data in a meaningful way. You can't compare apples and oranges, but you can compare types of apples, if that makes sense. If all of this is a bit daunting, which it can be, we have a huge repository of tutorials online and help articles with videos showing how to do various things, and how to explaining like spatial concepts that, like, for example, the boundaries that I just tried to explain to you. If you can't find the information you need through our help and tutorials, please just email us, support@aurin.org.au, and we have a help desk of a team of data, geniuses, and my team, and people who are really interested in geography. So we will be able to troubleshoot your problem and try to work out what data you're missing and what might be helpful for your application. And so I encourage you to just reach out. We're here for the entire duration of the hack, and we really want to see you get really good use out of our data and be able to really enhance what it is that you're hacking. So where can you find all this information? You can find it on our website. We have created a Hackathon Help. Hackathon Help page, and it starts like that. And here you can find information on our challenge, which is the AURIN Impact Award. So it's the best submission of a map or an app that you've used AURIN data to create impact. The rules are you need to use 2 different data sets from 2 different themes, so that's social, mobility, etc. And in order to qualify to be part in the AURIN prize. And it's $1,000 Australian dollars. So I encourage you to get onto the AURIN catalogue, find a couple of data sets that will enhance your hack and apply them. And then you could be in with a chance of winning $1,000. So here is on this page, you'll also find the application for the API key. As I said, it's a very straightforward process. You'll find links through to search the data. And then a little guide here on how to use the API. If you've never used an API before, there is scores of information on how to apply APIs in your work. I've put together a little how-to on how to do a simple WFS query. If you're not comfortable with the programmatic aspect of APIs, you can just call the data and it'll appear like a data set. And here's all the code that you need and the step-by-step guide on how to do that. So you can see it pops up with your sign in. You can put in the username and password that will be given. That's the key that we provide as the password. And then you grab that open that API ID for the specific data set that you want to access. And you can call it just in a simple web browser. You can do a web browser call, and it will download the data as a Excel file or a CSV file. And that's then yours to use and interrogate in your projects. If you're more GIS minded, then you can open the API with QGIS, and we have tutorials on how you'll be able to do that. And if you're more on the statistical analysis side, then you can open it with the R package of statistical analysis tools. And I think that's it from me. This is the point where I'd ask if there's any questions, but since this is a video, I'll sign off, and I encourage you to contact us through that support@aurin.org.au. I'm on Slack for most of every day, so I'm available, even if it feels like, I always say there's no such thing as a stupid question. So you need to ask, even if it feels like I've covered it or you should know it, please just reach out and ask us. And because of the data sets that I've highlighted for you here, there are scores more, I'm sure, that might be more more applicable for your exact hack. So that's AURIN. Good luck, everybody. And I'm really excited to hear from you and hear the projects that you're going to be putting together. Hack the planet, as Sam said. Bye.